Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lawrence, your host, your friend. Today, I have another good guest for you, Nancy Loeffler from Minnesota. We connected about a few weeks ago on the Serving Circle with a good chat, I believe last week. And she has a powerful story. We're going to share that here. She's the Grief Journey Guide. She's an author and speaker. And yes, this is what we're going to talk about and how the death of her daughter over 21 years ago affected the way that changed the course of her life, and now she's been working to help other people overcome their grief. And so that's what we're going to talk about, and a lot of other things as well. She's been receiving healing downloads ever since she had that experience a couple of decades ago, and now she's on a journey to help people, heal and get back on the track and pursue their path. So we're gonna talk about that. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you, Payman.
Very
Thank you
welcome.
for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. So the kind of conversation I like to have is to get to know you as a person. We're gonna talk about what you're doing in your business after, but first and foremost, we're gonna talk about
Mhm.
you as a human being. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So for people who don't know you, who's Nancy?
Well, I'm a mother, a wife, a grandmother. I'm a new grandmother.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. I've been a lifelong learner, and I've been on a path to uncover who I am. And I really only discovered that, as you said, through my grief journey.
Awesome. Now, I'm going to ask you now a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know you as a person.
Okay.
Tell us, what makes you happy?
Connecting with my family.
Awesome. What makes you smile?
My granddaughter.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Now, let's take the happiness factor a couple of hunches higher. What makes your soul come to life?
Ah, when I'm out in nature, when I'm dancing, when I'm doing anything creative that takes me out of, that puts me into timelessness.
Love that. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
Oh, well, it makes me sad when that I can't talk to my daughter, that I can't hug my daughter anymore. I still talk
Mm,
to her. It makes me sad when I can't connect with people, when I'm unable to reach someone, or when the person I'm talking with is so shut down that we can't make a connection.
yes,
It makes me
indeed.
angry when people don't want to learn or get see that there's other possibilities in life.
Absolutely. Now, what scares you?
Being alone, being isolated from my family. Um,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
that's a big one. Now, what would you say is your number one personal superpower?
presence, being
Present.
present. Hmm.
Mhm. All right. Now, you like traveling, right?
I do. Yeah.
What's the very first trip you took?
Well, the very first trip I took was to Disney World with my husband right after we got married.
Mm,
Yeah, didn't travel that much before with
mm,
my family of origin, so that was the first one.
okay. Now, let me take you down a different type of traveling, down the memory line.
Mm.
Go back to when you were a young girl. You know, when we're kids growing up, people around
Mhm.
us, parents, family, relatives, teachers always ask us, "So, Nancy, what do you want to become when you grow up?" What was your answer back then as a young girl?
My answer back then as a young girl was a ballerina.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to be a ballerina so bad. I had no idea what it would entail, but that's what enthralled me as a young girl.
Was it someone in your family that was a ballerina that inspired you, or just
No, no. It was just I must have seen one on TV or
okay?
seen something somewhere, and that's what I wanted to do.
Awesome. Now, what was your relationship growing up with school? Did you love school or did you hate school?
Um, I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It was I enjoyed going to be with friends. It wasn't my most favorite activity.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Art,
Which one?
art, drawing,
Art. Okay.
art. Yeah.
And was there any subject you could not stand?
Um, no, I liked parts of everything. I learned to like parts of everything. I even in high school I hated algebra. However,
Ah,
back
yes.
after I became an adult, I went back to school and I aced my algebra class. So
Mm,
I met those demons. So um,
nice.
I,
Awesome.
I learned to love parts of every subject.
Awesome. What was your very first job?
My very first job was working in a card and gift shop that my parents owned. So I was a Hallmark store. It wasn't like the Hallmark stores of today though. It was an earlier version, and we had cards and all kinds of gifts. So that was what I did.
Awesome. Now, let's move forward. Let's talk about your path from the moment you left school to now. How would
Mhm.
you describe your path? Would you say it was pretty much straightforward, smooth sailing once you get into one lane? It was the same, very straight, or was it like turns and twists, like a roller coaster?
Yeah, there was nothing straight about my path at all. As a matter of fact, it felt very chaotic to me. I felt like I wasn't on a path. Um, I wasn't sure where I was going. Yeah, there were lots of twists and turns and not knowing what was around that bend.
Okay. What kind of career path did you take?
My initial career path was into design.
Mm-hmm.
I went to an art school, so that
Oh, yeah.
art class was telling me what I was heading toward. I went to art school and I loved all the classes, and I was drawn to interior design, and I designed kitchens for my first
Wow.
job post college.
Mm-hmm. That was a good one, I guess. Yeah. Wow. And then after that, did you get into a different careers or you stayed in that industry?
Um, Well, after that, I became a full-time mother. I
Okay.
quit my job and I was a full-time mother. I quit that job and I became a full-time mother when my son was born over 41 years ago now, and then continued that for a while. And then when I went back to work, I went back to work as a project manager for a construction company. So it was still same type of work. I was managing multi-million-dollar projects for this company, and a lot of specializing in lab work for NIH and places like that.
Awesome. Now, there is a saying that says, I'm sure you heard it, that says, change your story, change your life. And by story, I mean what we tell ourselves on a daily basis inside our
Mhm.
head. So when you, Nancy, had to change your story to change your life, how did you do it? Did you do it to the help of friends, families, mentors, books, videos? Tell us the process you used to change your story to change your life.
The process I used to change my story was through mentors. I moved from Chicago to Maryland. When I moved to Maryland, I was a little bit untethered and reached out intuitively without really knowing it at the time. I still wasn't in touch with that intuition, to someone who was teaching the same presence practice that I now teach. And so she helped teach me how to be present and brought me into the Temple of the Sacred Feminine. And it was through that Temple of the Sacred Feminine that I got in touch with my intuition, with presence, with the idea that that it was possible to change my mindset, that it was that there were other possibilities for me, and that this little light that at that time was just an ember was real, and that as I began to nurture that, it began to come alive, and I began to know the Nancy that has been there all along, and I began to emerge more as myself when I work with those mentors.
Awesome. Okay. Now let's talk about your mission in this life. So you said you're a grief guide. Tell us about
Grief
that.
journey
Tell us,
guide.
yeah, tell us about how this first impacted your life with the loss of your daughter and all that. So
Yeah. Well, my daughter Leah was 17 years old, and she was in a car accident on her way to
oh
school
no.
in November of 2000. Yeah.
Oh wow. Sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was in the hospital for 5 days. She never regained consciousness. She had massive brain injuries. And we were faced with the decision that no one should ever have to be faced with, to remove life support
Absolutely. Yeah.
from her. And it was as you can imagine, it was one of the darkest times in my life, in my husband's life. My son was 20 at the time.
Mhm.
And so we made this decision because she had no more activity, brain activity. And so when I left the hospital on the day that we removed life support, I thought my life was over. I had no idea how I was going to get from that moment to the next moment, let alone here I am over 21 years later. And I wanted to completely isolate myself. You asked me what I was afraid of, and I probably would have answered that I was afraid of losing a child, but I did, and I have survived that. But a couple of weeks after she died, I received a message that I really look at now as the message that saved my life. And that is that losing Leah is too high a price to pay to not live the life that I was meant to live. And that everything I had done up until that point had prepared me for what was coming next. So what that told me is that I was going to have to figure out a way to keep on this path, to stay.
Sorry, how did you get this message? Was it the message someone sent you? Was it a download or what?
It was a download. It was
Okay.
a full body feeling. I can still feel, when I talk about it today, I can still feel how it felt in my body when I first
What were you
received it.
doing? Were you
Came in.
sleeping, sitting, working,
I
walking?
I just walked from her room. I hadn't done anything to her room yet. I had walked out of her room into the next room, and I got it right then.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
that
So
might
go ahead.
do you think that might be a message that she might have sent you directly, or maybe, or I mean, yeah, herself, her soul, or maybe even your own soul at the highest level?
Yeah, I think it was a conspiring of both of our souls.
Mhm,
It felt very much like a soul message.
mhm. How
And
did you feel it?
after that,
Was it more like a feeling? Did you see the words in your eyes, in your
no,
mind's
it was a
eye?
feeling.
Just a
It
feeling.
it was a feeling, but those were the words that came when I got the download.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And then, okay. And then what helped you to overcome this extremely challenging and dark time? What allowed, because I can see this can be extremely, very, very difficult time to overcome. What was the one thing or
Yeah.
whatever that was it, people, your family? Was it your own self? How did you overcome that?
it was the present moment awareness practice called Samyama that was already a part of my life at the time. The present moment awareness that allowed me to be in the moment with the pain of losing Leah without all the stories my head was spinning about it. You know, my head wanted to slice and dice the story to try to make a different outcome. And that wasn't going to happen. So I already had a trusted facilitator of Samyama, and she held space for me to go really deep and allowed my heart to hold the stories. To hold the feelings without the story, so that they could be transmuted and shifted. And eventually, I was able to do that for myself. So the practice works on two levels. It works by self Samyama, and then also with the facilitator. And that's what I do with my own clients, is facilitate them in this process and hold space so that they too can go deep. And what I learned by doing this is that it not only shifted my feelings of grief and pain and all everything that arose from my grief, it also helped to heal the wounds from my childhood that I had not been able to get underneath. I had done some clearing of the hubris, but I hadn't been able to get underneath and clear it completely, so that it's kind of like in the spring when you're clearing weeds and leaves to allow the flowers to grow underneath, or the grass or whatever it is, to allow the light and the water to reach it. If you keep piling that up, it'll never reach it, so it won't grow. So I was able to clear those protective layers on my heart so that I could feel it. And that's where I found the alchemy. I found that our hearts are chemical vessels that can hold everything, and that can shift even our most devastating feelings.
And then after that, after you overcame the passing of your daughter, did you go back to your career, or did you completely change and went to help other people overcoming their grief?
I stayed in my career as a project manager for a while. I became certified as a Samyama practitioner, and I began seeing clients, not for grief. I wasn't ready for that yet. I began offering Samyama as a resource for daily living, because it helps. Presence works on everything. And over 75% of my clients were grief clients.
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't asking for it. Yeah, they were coming. And so eventually I did. I was called to leave that career. I took early retirement, and I crafted a body of work that uses foundation, Samyama as the foundation, and along with other things that helped me along on my journey. And I began helping others to move through grief, to be with their feelings in their hearts, and see grief as a transformative journey.
Yeah. So, I was never religious, but I always believed in God. And since the start of the pandemic, I've had a spiritual awakening. So before my awakening, whenever something bad happened to me, I would always, play the victim and say, why me? Why did you deserve this and all that? Then through the pandemic, once I had my awakening, I understood the tremendous powers of asking questions and the right question. And then instead of asking why me, or why did you deserve this, I ask, what is this trying to teach me? What is a lesson here for me to learn? So, for example, to give you a similar example to yours. So over the past couple of years, my father passed away because he had cancer, and it was for me a blessing in disguise to. I was living abroad. I came back home when the pandemic started. It was a blessing in disguise for me to spend time with them, and also to help take care of him in his last few months. So, and I think I had my spiritual awakening right on time, because it was a spiritual awakening that allowed me to overcome that, not only the sickness, but also the passing. And then
Mhm.
once, when I asked at the highest level, what is this trying to teach me? What is a lesson for me to learn through all of this? I realized that this was the greatest gift my father has ever given me. And it's been really, I'm the eldest son. I was really spoiled growing up. But this, the greatest gift he gave me was that of opening my heart. I used to be very impatient. That allowed
Mhm.
me now to become patient, compassionate, because, you know, when you have to, my father was a very strong man, you know, he was plus my age, but still he was fiercely independent. And when it came to time to him for, couldn't even get from his bed to the bathroom, I had to carry him on my shoulder. You know, that
Mhm.
really allowed me to become extremely patient, compassionate, and basically helped me open my heart. So that, I'm convinced that was the greatest gift that my father has blessed me with. So you going back
Mhm.
at the tragic, you know, event of losing Leah at such a young age in such a tragic fashion,
Mhm.
looking back at it from a spiritual angle,
Mhm.
what would you say is the lesson for you to learn, that for you to learn through all of that, even though how painful it was and it still is today?
Yeah, there have been so many lessons
Hmm.
from this experience, and Leah
Hmm.
continues to teach me, to be one of my greatest teachers. And I think the greatest lesson is to trust that all is well, no matter what. I'm always taken care of. It too opened my heart completely. It made me able to, you know, I said before, I wanted to connect with people. I wasn't able to connect with people before I my heart was broken open in this way. You know, so um, being able to, and I know I wouldn't have been able to greet my granddaughter with the open heart that I did if I hadn't had met my grief the way that I did. So it's those there have been blessings and grace all along the journey,
Hmm.
and many gifts that I have received. The biggest one is that I was able to know Leah and be her mother and continue to be who I am.
Yeah.
Another one was connecting with some of her friends in ways that I wouldn't have been able to do under any other circumstances.
Hmm. I can see that. Yeah. Wow. And then you said after her passing, this is when you started having, you know, downloads. Were you having downloads before that, or they appeared after her passing?
I probably had them before. I didn't recognize them for what they were until after she passed. So yes, I also was called to write a book about my experience, which contains a lot of those downloads, because I just recently reread a lot of it, and I'm thinking, who wrote this? I don't remember writing this. You know, it was one of those things where it came through me. So it really brought me back home to myself. This journey,
What is the title of your book?
The Alchemy of Grief: Your Journey to Wholeness.
All right, I'll put it in the show notes. And then they mentioned, oh, beautiful. Okay, I'll definitely put it on the show note. Thank you. So you mentioned you were having downloads before, but you were not able to recognize them.
Mhm.
What made you what made you understand that, hey, these are not just random. I need to pay attention to them. These are important messages.
I learned how my intuition, my inner knowing, I learned how it felt in my body. And that first message that I told you about was sort of, didn't sort of, it crystallized and clarified it. This, when you feel like this, it's important.
And what was that first message? Because it was very powerful. I want you to say that again.
Losing Leah is too high a price to pay to not live the life that I was meant to live.
What do you think that really meant? How did you decipher that? What did that mean back then to you?
It meant that I needed to find a way to honor Leah for one thing, so
Mhm.
that it meant that I needed to continue to excavate, to discover the person that I am, and not stay stuck, not stay in a place that wasn't going to serve me, or that would ruin the relationships with my family and with my friends, that would keep me in a place without any light.
Were you a religious or spiritual person before that, or
I yes, I was spiritual,
okay,
um, and this brought it to a whole new level.
absolutely, wow. And then slowly after you started overcoming this, then you went back to your career, and then you started becoming, you said, a coach, and then you
Mhm.
mentioned for some reason you're attracting mostly grief, people who are overcoming grief. So at
Right.
what point did you decide to go all in, full in into this new path?
Well, it was I was I had already quit my job, taken the early retirement. I was creating a different kind of a coaching business, more of a life coaching business. And I was on a business retreat with people that I had been in a coaching program, and the culmination of it was a business retreat. So I was on this retreat with all the participants, and the last day was the mastermind hot seat day, and I was the last one going up, and I was watching all these. Everyone was having these major breakthroughs, and I thought, well, I know that's not going to happen to me, because I know exactly what I need to do to launch my business. So I got in the hot seat. The facilitator said to me, she asked me a question. I don't remember what the question is today, but the answer was, the initiation of my daughter's death led me to be doing something that is in alignment with my heart. She looked at me and she said, so then why aren't you helping people navigate their grief journeys? And in that moment, everything came together. My soul said, finally. And that was the moment that I shifted from doing something that wasn't my purpose into what I'm meant to do. On my way home from that retreat, I wrote a newsletter explaining what had happened and shifting my focus to uh, helping people move through grief. And I got home and I had three clients. So from that moment on, I that's has been my calling.
So how long have you been doing this now?
I've been doing it for 7 years.
7 years, okay. And that's your main business currently?
Yes.
All right. Tell us more about the structure of your program. How do you help people? Is it one-on-one? Is it small classes? And is it like a time frame, like say 1 month, 2 weeks, 6 months, or is it an ongoing, follow
Yeah.
up? And tell us more about the structure of your program and all that good stuff.
It's one-on-one.
Okay.
I work one-on-one with people who are ready to step into a transformation, who are asking what's next, what's where is my grief journey calling me. And it's I work anywhere from 3 to 6 sessions to a year. I have one client who's been seeing me every week for about 5 years.
Mhm.
So I create a custom, unique package for each person. We always start with Samyama, and I teach them the practice, and then we go from there. There's other strategies that I incorporate, like gratitude and self-care. What does self-care, self-love look like for you when you're grieving? What does it really mean for you? Not what everyone's telling you it should be. But it's really also about learning how to feel our feelings, because so many of us don't want to do that. And then I would say, for the most part, I work about 6 months, at a minimum. Most people say, let me try it for 3. And then it goes from 6. A year-long program is my sweet spot, because a year is a good length of time to get into the meat of what's going on, or rather get to the heart of the matter. That's a better way to describe it, because, and I always start with a grief history, because where we've come in our grief journey, even before we knew we were on a grief journey, impacts where we are today, why we are saying, okay, this is the day I want to start addressing my grief. So I start with the grief journey, and then I create a safe space where we can both go deep. And I receive sacred questions. You were talking about questions before. I receive sacred questions for my clients. And the reason I know they're for my clients and not me is that most of the time they make no sense to me. And again, it's a feeling in my body. So I ask the questions, and we go from there. Sometimes we do inner child work. It all depends on where my client is leading me. So I'm holding the space for them to do their work and facilitating that work. It's a very organic way of working, and it's where I feel most connected to myself these days.
And then, what would you say is your ideal client? Do you have an avatar for your ideal client?
My ideal client is someone who is ready to see what the gifts of the grief journey are, who recognizes that there are gifts and lessons, and recognizes that the grief journey is calling them into something more, and someone who doesn't want to stay stuck, someone who doesn't want to stay stuck in a place that isn't serving them.
From your experience, have you noticed any time frame, for example, after a loss? How long after a loss does usually someone becomes ready to start the overcoming the grief process?
It's it's not necessarily a length of time, because we hear time heals all wounds.
Yes.
But it's what you're doing during that time. It's what you're doing with the time. I had a client who I started working with 2 years after her loss.
Okay.
And she hadn't done anything with her husband's stuff. She was back at day 1. So it depends on what you're doing with the time. Everybody's different. Some people want to dive in right away, like I did, and other people need time to acclimate to their new normal. So for that reason, my relationship with my client and my conversations with my client can last a longer time before we actually start working together. Mm-hmm. Someone needs to really get to know me before they say, yes, I want to be that vulnerable with you. And that doesn't mean that I have sessions with them and then we start working together. It means I might have a conversation with them, and then check in with them a few months later, and then start working with them. And they'll watch. I have a lot of stuff online, so they'll read my blogs and watch my videos, read my book, and then they'll say, okay, now I'm ready. So I plant a lot of seeds, and some of them take longer to germinate. Those clients, though, that know that they're ready, they are my ideal clients, because they're not only ready to work with me, but they're ready to do the work.
Are you doing any marketing, such as running ads, or you're just using the material you put out online and people just see them and get in touch with you?
Mostly online. Another thing that I'm doing, my husband and I are doing a webinar called Changing the Conversation Around Grief. We're just starting to do that together. It's going to be a membership program. So I've done ads without a whole lot of success,
Yeah.
quite frankly. Most of my referrals come from either not ex-clients, former clients, or people that I've met in the serving circle or NLBP or places like that. Speaking engagements that I do, things like that. And I also have a self-guided grief journey course that is a series of videos that
Mhm.
is basically uses all the same strategies and things that I use when I work one-to-one.
Okay. Now, share with us, if you can, an example of the most remarkable transformation you've seen from one of your clients so far.
Hmm. I had a client who, this was one of my very first clients, and she was coming to me because she was experiencing ambiguous grief. And ambiguous grief is say, for instance, there's two instances of ambiguous grief. When a person is still physically present, but there's no emotional connection, like in a divorce, or when there's still an emotional connection and there's no physical presence, say in a kidnapping, just as an example. But there's a lot of other examples. And she is now helping people specifically with ambiguous grief. She has done a lot of research on it and helps other people to recognize ambiguous grief and move through it. So she recognized in herself the work that needed to be done and then took it out and is now helping others in the same way that she needed to be helped.
Right? That's a good one. Now, let's talk about causes. This is the theme of this podcast. What would you say is a cause that is dear to your heart, Nancy?
Cause. It's a great question, and I don't know that I have a really good answer for it.
Like, for example, to give you an example, for me, it's about giving access to education to underprivileged kids. For example, each person that signs up for my program, the 3-week Launch Your Podcast Challenge, I sponsor a year of access to sports and education to an underprivileged child in India. So for you, what would you say is something similar, a cause? Because for me, I've been blessed to travel a lot, and the two biggest schools of life for me have been sports and traveling. So, and I see that as a wonderful platform to not only to educate and teach, but to empower and inspire kids and taking kids away from the streets, especially at the young age where they're most vulnerable, and put them back on the right track and give them access to a normal life.
Yeah. One cause that comes to mind is helping young girls find their voice, because I didn't have one as a child. I was there was a lot going on in my life that kept that from happening, and helping girls to find their voice and feel confident in who they are, not being relegated to being who someone else wants them to be.
Okay, it's a good one, like that. Now, let's wrap this up by I'm going to be asking you a series of rapid fire questions on advices. Ready?
Okay.
All right. What would you say has been so far the best piece of advice you've received?
To stay present. This moment is the only moment we have.
Absolutely. What would you say has been so far the worst piece of advice you've received?
Don't feel your feelings. Don't feel like that.
Now imagine that you were blessed with a time machine. You can go back in time to and sit face to face with with your 18-year-old self. What's the number one piece of advice you would give to the younger 18-year-old Nancy?
Yeah, you are enough. You are beautiful. You are loved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, do you have your own podcast?
Not a podcast, but we're starting this webinar.
Okay. Now imagine you had your podcast and today you're interviewing the most special person in your life, which is yourself. What is the first question that you want to ask yourself that comes to mind?
Wow, that's a great question. Why are you here?
What is your answer?
Just be in service to love.
Right now, let me ask you one more question. That line now, and I know that everything around us, we are heard all the time. What is the number one question you want to ask to Leah right now? And I know she will hear. She can hear you.
Yeah. Are you happy?
That's a good one. What do you think will be your answer?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Powerful. Thank you. Now,
Thank you.
you're welcome. If someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so?
My website is beingwithgrief.com. Also on Facebook, Being with Grief.
Okay. What's your website again? I'll put it in the show note.
www.beingwithgrief.com.
Okay. I'll put it in the show note. Absolutely. Now, listen, Nancy, absolute honor talking to you. Thank you for opening up and sharing your powerful story. One thing I understood through my awakening is that we all have our fair share of dark time tragedies and tough moments. These are obstacles for us to grow up, to get to the next level, to become the person we're meant to be. And then these obstacles, they become our lessons. And then those lessons become our gift, our message to the world. And then that gift becomes our responsibility to share it, because it's one thing for you to go through it and overcome it.
Yes.
But then the ultimate power is for us to share it with others. So together we can all, raise, together as a human race. So I salute you. Thank you for coming here. You're a true leader with a heart. And you've been, yes, it's been incredibly, difficult for you, but you've made it, and now you're blessed with a tremendously powerful message, a gift to the world. And any way, shape, or form that I can help you to spread your message, I'm here for you. Don't be shy. I would be happy to, anything I can, let me know. I've had over 156 guests on my podcast. Have a look at the list. If there's any one of them you feel would be a good connection for you, let me know. And I would be very happy to do an intro for you. Any way, shape, or form I can help you, let me know. And I really mean it. I'm not just trying to be polite. I really sincerely mean it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I salute you. You're truly leader with a heart. You have a powerful message. Very powerful, very inspiring. And yeah, stay safe, stay awesome. God bless you. We're definitely going to be talking soon. Thank you very much, my friend. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.